have this working hypothesis that COVID is going to end mommy wars. I'm working on a whole episode about this, but basically my theory is that when moms from all socioeconomic levels and different cultures experience a crisis like this together, we come together. We empathize. We realize that we're all doing our best. We understand it doesn't always look pretty. We give each other grace. One of the many skirmishes of the mommy wars has been education, specifically homeschool versus public school, with side skirmishes about charter schools and private schools. We moms typically plant our stakes in the ground and defend our decisions. Well, doesn't that all seem silly now? Spring of 2020 threw us all into the homeschool arena, even those of us like me who swore we would never homeschool. Granted, this was not real homeschool. For most of us, it was a weird, Zoomy, remote school patchwork of homeschool and public school. And yet, even though we struggled mightily through the end of the school year, I got glimpses of some of the perks of homeschool that made me realize those homeschooling moms weren't so crazy after all. This is the How She Moms podcast, where we talk about how different moms solve the same problems. I'm Whitney Archibald, a mother of 5 kids myself. I collect ideas so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. This summer, I struggled along with so many other moms, first figuring out what our options even were in our specific districts, up to the last possible moment, and then deciding among those options. Some of us, especially moms who have to go into work and cannot work from home, but who don't have the option to send kids to school, really had no good choices. Although it took a while for our school district and our individual schools to decide what our options were, I am privileged to have had the full spectrum of choices because the incidence of COVID-19 is still low in our town. I could find my own curriculum and homeschool my kids. I could send my 4 youngest to school 5 days a week wearing masks and following strict safety protocols. I could send them to a different neighborhood school to do hybrid school 2 days a week and remote school the other 3 days. Or they could all attend whichever school they wanted fully remote. In fact, I felt overwhelmed by all the choices. Then I had a mind-blowing realization. These weren't new options at all. At least in my school district, they've all been here all along. I just chose to ignore them. Ultimately, we decided to send 4 of my kids to their charter school full-time with masks and cohorts, while my high school freshman is on a hybrid schedule. So this is our situation, for now. We are fully aware that the situation could change at any moment. I was especially nervous about this hybrid thing, since this particular son did not adjust well to remote school this spring at all. But it turns out it's been amazing. So much so that it might even be the ideal arrangement for all my kids. Most importantly, mixing things up a bit has opened me up to all the other options. I used to utterly dismiss any thought of homeschooling my kids. That might work for some families, but I had too many strong personalities, too much other stuff to do, and just too many kids to homeschool. But now that I've gotten a taste of some of the benefits of homeschooling and talked to many moms who chose to homeschool for different reasons, now that I've met their decidedly not weird kids, and learned just how many different ways there are to homeschool these days, with so many amazing resources, I've taken my stake out of the ground and opened my mind. I might even choose to do it in some form in the future. And the best part is, I see other moms opening their minds as well. For a while, my Instagram was full of memes about supporting moms who made every different school decision. I saw very little criticism, a lot of encouragement, and compassion and understanding for individual circumstances. I saw veteran homeschool moms coming out of the woodwork to offer support and help to new homeschool moms. I saw families, rich and poor, banding together in co-ops to support each other so they could both work and teach their kids. More than ever, we are all in this together. It's a beautiful thing. So this is not an episode about the nitty-gritty of homeschooling, though I do plan to do a more comprehensive episode, or maybe even a multi-part series about that in the future. This is an episode for the moms that need the most help right now, first-time homeschoolers and remote schoolers. I'm going to split the episode into 2 parts, first help and then hope. We'll start by troubleshooting some of the challenges of teaching your kids at home, including how to get your own work done while the kids are all home. Then we'll play Pollyanna and talk about some of the positive things about teaching your kids at home. The goal here is to focus on what you're gaining this year rather than what you're missing out on, to replace some of your fear and dread with hope and maybe even excitement. I'm not trying to minimize that fear and dread at all. Those are very understandable emotions to be having right now. This is hard. But after interviewing the moms I talked to for this episode, I felt so much more hopeful and optimistic, and I wanted to bottle that feeling up for you as well. So first, the help part. Since I'm obviously not an expert on homeschool or remote school, I called 3 moms with experience to help me. My childhood friend Jackie Johnson, who homeschools her daughter, Jody Chafee, a homeschool mom of 4, and Siri Payne, who has a unique perspective on remote school. Not only did Siri help her 3 daughters with remote school this spring, but before COVID, she was a pioneer in remote teaching in a program for kids with special needs. Plus, she is one of the most organized people I know. Siri is now a life coach for moms with both individual and group coaching. You can find her at organizedlife.coach on the web and on Instagram. She started our conversation with some great advice.
So to set yourself up for the most success, determine first what you want to accomplish and what you hope to help your child accomplish this next year, right? So is it to do every assignment, or is it just to do their best and not give up? Is it to make some progress? Is it to be consistent with their learning? Or do you want to set the goal that they learn 1 grade level of curriculum material? Like if they were to be tested the next year, they are testing 1 grade level above. Or it can be some of those other things like learning and fostering independence and grow, and also many other things go into the academic year. So figure out the outcomes for your family. And to do that, you could maybe consider such questions as like, what do I want to focus on for this school year? What do I want to make important for me and for my child this year? How do I want to feel this year is a big one, right? Because we get to choose our feelings. And I know right now, many of us aren't feeling the way we would hope to feel this year. Or what can you do to help this year be less stressful for everyone? So once you decide on what you want to foster this year, then keep that in mind when you're working with your children, when you're working on school, and when you're interacting with them. And you might just be helping them to feel more safe and more successful and have less anxiety this year, more so than learning. And that is totally okay. Because if a child isn't feeling safe or secure, if a child is full of anxiety, it can be very difficult for them to learn.
Your objectives don't have to be ambitious here. If survival is your goal, focus on survival. Make it through every day. And remember that choosing one priority means another one has to give. For us this spring, it was the housekeeping. The kids were all home messing it up all day, and I was busy helping them with their work. I knew I could mobilize them, come up with a good system, and we could get it all done. But I deliberately chose to make learning the priority and just live in a mess for a while. We just all kind of lowered our standards for the duration of the school year. Now, I know that's not a great solution if you're going to try and do it for the whole school year, but you are probably going to have to let go of your standards a little bit just because there's not enough time to get it all done. I also had to prioritize on a micro level with each kid. One cried each time she had to do a video conference with her class. So I talked to the teacher and we checked in other ways. One absolutely refused to do his spelling work. I did a little research and came to the conclusion that some people, read this child, are just not natural spellers. And he'll do just fine in this world without it. So I eliminated the battle of spelling from our relationship, and suddenly he was getting the rest of his work done without a fuss. He just got really bad grades on spelling. In this vein, Dana, whom I follow on Instagram at Dana_daily inspiration, is focusing this year on helping her kids love learning. She wrote, "I'm in charge here. I create and maintain the enthusiasm, curiosity, and magic around here. I love the idea that although academics are obviously important, we can choose to prioritize other important things, like building relationships with our kids, fostering curiosity, or even teaching life skills." So obviously one of the biggest challenges to teaching our kids at home is finding time for our own work. And there's more work than ever. This spring, I could not figure out how people were finding time to do puzzles, organize and remodel their houses, and why on earth they were sharing ideas about how to fight boredom during quarantine. I had never been busier. I did not need ideas to fill my time. Siri has been focusing on helping working moms figure out how to work and manage their kids' education. Here's one of her suggestions about how to get some work done.
So if you're trying to do 2 things, like run a household or create a business, or as an employee, create a time in your house for like independent learning. And this is also when you would get to have the opportunity to work for your job as well. So set aside a time or a few times throughout the day that the child can count on you to be available if they have questions for you. But then the other part of the time, they're independent learning. And then what you want to do is really make sure that you honor the time that you set to really build trust and confidence in your child, right? They know they can count on you. They know that you'll be there to answer those questions, and then they can have that. And that really will diffuse some of the anxiety. And it also will help the child to just really foster independent learning and just really allow them to become problem solvers and allow them to maybe even ask other people or other siblings if they need help, or how they could help them solve the problem, or just allow them to move on to another activity and just know that they can come back and ask you a question when that time happens. In order for this to be super successful, choose activities during the independent time that they can complete on their own with little assistance. So for example, this could be like independent reading, quiet time, online resources that you may want your child to do, but has guided instruction for them. It could be practicing math facts or sight words, or other activities that they can enjoy and do on their own.
So basically, you could set up office hours for when you're available. Jody Chafee has always homeschooled her 4 children, who currently range in age from 6 to 11. Jody's daily schedule includes independent time for her kids every afternoon, but she gives them specific guidelines for that time.
After lunch is when we open up the free time, basically around the guidelines of our 4 Ps is what we call it: practice, projects, personal study, and play. And so we want our kids to, pick something that they want to practice. If it's a language or a skill or, instruments or, something that they want to practice. My daughter sometimes picks cooking at that time. And then a project, again, it's like thin line between project and practice, because sometimes a project is practicing,
right.
But a project, like for my little guy and little gal that I have, they're 6 and 7, a project might just be doing puzzles or doing Legos, or playing in the sandbox. I mean, if it's something that they can engross themselves into. And then personal study, want to make sure that they're at least sitting down to read something, doing something in some kind of a workbook that they choose. And then playtime. So it's like, once they've checked off those 3 things, then it's like, okay, I did those things. All right, do whatever you want. Free reign, I'm a big advocate of downtime. Actually, there's this really good book that I'm reading right now called The Self-Driven Child. And he talks about the importance of downtime to allow kids space to meditate and daydream and digest and process the things that they're learning, because then they learn about themselves. They become their own person. And so it's a really powerful mindset to remember that it's okay for our kids to get bored. It's okay for them to have space to meditate and daydream, because they need that. That's what kids need in order to develop their brains and their personalities. When kids are allowed to choose what they do, and then they become engrossed in it, then they learn how to enter that state of flow in their mind, where it's just challenging enough that it's inspiring them, but not so challenging that they shut down. And then when they learn that and they've practiced that, they get engrossed in this thing. Like my kids love playing with Legos. They will play with Legos all day long. And we have a sandbox. We built a sandbox. They could sit there in the sandbox all day long. And some days I let them, because they're learning to be able to build and problem solve and create. And so learning to be like, okay, I think I can figure this out, becomes more natural state of mind, because he's already practiced it in his playtime, or when he's building a puzzle or doing things like that. Those kinds of things where it's just beyond their capacity, so that it's challenging, but still within their capacity, that it's not too hard. That is to translate it into other skills that will develop throughout their lives.
Jody hosts a podcast herself called The Family Culture Movement, and has created some really great resources, including a family success toolkit on her website, homeandfamilyculture.com. You can go there to sign up for a free membership and get access to the toolkit. As you're figuring out what your home learning schedule will look like, you'll have to figure out your own comfort level with flexibility and structure. Here's Siri again.
So while a flexible schedule is a perk of an at-home learning for sure, I think it's really wise to consider creating a school schedule and maybe like a set of rules that you will follow to help you stay on a structured schedule in your home. And it doesn't have to be rigorous, right? And it doesn't need to be planned down to the 20-minute segments, but just setting a block of time with a starting and an ending for specific school learning. That should be your baseline. So this can be different and unique for you and for your home environment. Maybe you just say, okay, school time at our house is from 9 to 12, or maybe 12 to 3. Or possibly your family decides you want to do 2 blocks where you do like a 9 to 11, and then maybe you have some break or free time, and then like a 1 to 3 of an academic block. So of course, do whatever works best for your family, but whatever you do decide, just make sure that you're honoring that time commitment.
This is great advice. if this kind of structure works for you. Megan Cheney prefers thinking of her homeschool days in terms of rhythms. They set goals that they want to accomplish each day, but they don't stick to a strict timetable. Each activity flows into the next so they don't feel rushed or anxious. Jacqueline Johnson also follows a more relaxed schedule with her 11-year-old daughter. Just a heads up, Jackie is a fast talker, which is one of the many, many reasons I love her.
We do like an hour and a half of school a day. Like if we do more than 2 hours, I'm like, okay, we're done. When I say school, I mean like pen to paper or computer or whatever. It's done in 2 hours. And then the rest of the day, we're still learning. We're just learning through life, like whatever we're doing is every hour is a learning experience, whether you're at the museum, the store, whatever, watching TV even. But when I went scholastic books, pen, paper, computer, that is like 2 hours max a day. Some days we don't do anything. So other days we'll do longer. So it all kind of evens out.
Jody starts her homeschool day with breakfast and a few morning chores, and then 3 to 4 hours of family learning time. Then lunch and downtime, which we already talked about. The last part of her schedule, though, solves another problem, the mess that our kids create when they're home all day.
At the end of the day, right before dinner, we do what we call restoring balance. So all the things that they got out and all the messes that they made, because in the past, I would have followed them around and been like, clean that up, put that away, and I was going crazy, feeling so anxious about all the clutter. Well, now we just go, look, do whatever you want, make whatever messes you want, try to clean up after yourself if you can. But by the end of the day, we're going to clean it up. We're going to put it away or at least put it where, put it in a place where we can set it aside for tomorrow. Because I found that when I was wandering around looking at all the messes and feeling anxious, that just made them feel anxious too. And then they didn't want to get anything out and they were upset.
I love that she calls it restoring balance instead of cleanup time. It makes that job more about achieving a feeling instead of completing a task. If you can't let it go for the whole day, like Jody, you could have another pickup time at lunchtime. Another challenge to teaching at home is figuring out where to do it. I've seen some pretty creative spaces that families have created on Instagram, but your school space doesn't have to be fancy or pretty to work. Still, Siri suggests that you create a designated learning area, even if it's just a corner of your living room.
That will make everybody, even the littles, even your bigs, everybody can take that learning more seriously because it's signaling like you're in this quiet area. This is where we're dedicated to learning, kind of like a library, right? Like you just go in there and you automatically have that, oh, we're in a library. This is how we act. I think that if you designate that area, that will allow everyone to be able to take the schooling and the learning in there more seriously. And then again, if a separate room or area isn't possible, because I know that sometimes that's not, consider just creating some kind of rules or boundaries, like no TV for anyone during school hours, whatever you deem is that school time. And maybe that's even for the littles in the family that aren't taking school. Or maybe you just try to eliminate distractions as best as you can and just get creative on how you can do that. And maybe even ask your kids, like, what's the most distracting thing for you? How do you think you would learn better? Like, they know. And if you ask them and give them options, they'll maybe be able to help you solve some of these problems.
That said, don't beat yourself up over distractions in your home. Last week, my friends at Family Looking Up released a fabulous podcast episode called Combating Homeschool Overwhelm with Jen Bradley. It had so much fantastic advice, definitely worth a listen to the whole episode. But one of the best things Jen said was that school has distractions too. They're just different distractions. In fact, school probably has even more distractions than a home with little siblings. So don't stress yourself out trying to create the perfect learning environment. And your learning environment doesn't have to be inside at all. One of the best parts about my family's remote school experience this spring was when I decided that we'd take Charlotte's Web for a hike. Almost every day we'd hit the trails behind our house and stop to read at benches along the way. It was lovely and something we really looked forward to. That leads us to one of my very favorite tips from Jackie: adapt to your kids' unique learning styles. Had she not started homeschooling,
I never would have known that my daughter learns math by dancing and singing. I never would have known that. So the first day I was ever teaching her was kindergarten, first day. And we're doing math, and she starts jumping up and twirling. And I was, Claire, I was about to tell her to stop it. But then I realized, well, she's doing what I'm asking her to do. She's just doing it, singing and dancing. And like, oh, she wouldn't be able to do that in a kindergarten classroom with 24 kids. And she really wouldn't. I mean, the teacher would tell her, Claire, you're being disruptive. And I would understand. I was going to do the same thing in my kitchen with her, just me and her. But I let her do it, and honestly, she's still like, I'll catch her doing math facts, and she'll be like, 9 times 10 is that, and there's no music on, it's just her. But that's how she learns, and I think that's a really awesome privilege of homeschooling, is that you get to, if you can, let go of your own preconceived notions of how people learn. I try to teach Claire as Jackie, like little Jackie. I expected her to be like into classic novels. Her favorite book is going to be The Secret Garden, like me, or like she's going to love Pride and Prejudice. And she doesn't. She likes Harry Potter. She likes Diary of a Wimpy Kid. She likes Narnia, like all the things I hate. And I'm like, for a long time, I struggled trying to teach her like me. I was the kid that didn't get up and dance around. I was like, I'm going to do the math, and I'm going to do it silently, and I'm going to do it fast. But she's the one who wants to dance around and sing, and she's the one who likes science fiction or like fantasy, and I hate fantasy. But I'm like, that's been the thing that I've had to learn, is how to like let her learn the way that she wants to learn. And I regret that, not doing that right the first couple of years and trying to teach little Jackie instead of teaching Claire. I'd say that was, if I could tell anyone advice about homeschooling, is to teach your kid, not yourself, and let them learn. You're not really teaching them, it's letting them learn.
When Siri's girls started remote school this spring, Siri quickly noticed that her youngest daughter wanted to get it over as quickly as possible.
So you just sat down and would do all the work on Monday and maybe Tuesday if needed, and then took the rest of the week off. It was fun to see that, they just their preferences and how they worked. And of course, my 14-year-old would get a little edgy because she's like, I have all this to do. And I tried to remind her, like, you have all week. But it felt better for her, I think, to get it all on her plate. And then she's like, I can breathe for the rest of the week. And so, yeah, it was a little bit anxiety prone, that day that she was just trying to get everything done. But then I think she felt better the rest of the week. So it was just fun to see how that they adapted their own abilities and capabilities to meet their needs.
My second grader got very overwhelmed when she saw her weekly to-do list, so I quickly learned to make it off limits. I would access the to-do list and click on assignments for her so she could only see the task at hand, not the whole list. Then when she was done, I'd show her the whole list so she could see how much she had accomplished. Megan Cheney, who Instagrams at Home with Megan, finds that letting kids go at their own pace is the best part of homeschool. She says, struggling with a subject? Slow down so they can really take it in. It might take longer than the 4 weeks that the school would have given. That's okay. They will catch up eventually. Likewise, if they're really clicking with a subject, I let them zoom through. I've found that making them stay at a slower pace of the curriculum will only lead to a bored child that is more likely to rebel against doing schoolwork at all. Another great piece of advice from Jody is to model a love for learning by learning in front of your kids.
If I'm taking care of myself, I'm doing things that inspire me, and I'm learning and leading out in those things that I want my kids to learn, then they're going to see that as a natural part of life. They're going to see that, mom likes to read books. I like to read books. Mom likes to write in her journal or write about what she's reading. I like to write in journal and write about what I'm reading. And so it becomes this thing where it becomes this natural cycle where we model it and they do it. And I'm learning that by doing those things, I'm able to enjoy my life more because I'm doing something that I am passionate about and not feeling guilty that I'm taking time away from being with my kids or homeschooling them. No, this is part of it. Yeah. This is all part of it because they're seeing that I'm doing something I love to do. And now they go, well, I want to do something I love to do. And so they're seeing me model that, being able to come to them more fulfilled and more available.
And here's another breath of fresh air. You don't have to do it all alone. You can ask for help. Especially if you're doing remote school, this should be a partnership between parents and teachers.
I think the teachers are very eager to work with you, right? They just want what's best for the child as well. They want the child to be successful and feel safe and make academic progress. So I think that if you are really articulate and really stay, in contact with the teacher, they will have a desire to accommodate the assignments so that your child is learning and growing and not like frustrated and full of anxiety.
You can also look to friends and family for help. My friend Whitney Thomas, who is one of my main advisors for this podcast, is really good at asking for help. During the first round of distance learning, she enlisted the help of her in-laws to read with her kids, even though she lives in Hawaii and they live on the mainland. They'd buy the books that their grandkids were reading and take turns with the kids reading pages over video chat. This year, she's hired a teenage babysitter to help her with homeschool some afternoons. This is a great resource for moms with young kids, Teenagers who are also learning from home have more time on their hands and would love to make a buck. I knew my one hybrid learner would struggle with independent learning, so I organized a small study group with 2 friends. They trade off whose houses they study at on their at-home days, and now he actually looks forward to remote school because he gets to hang out with his friends, and they're surprisingly efficient at getting everything done. So now let's talk about some of the reasons you may end up really loving this at-home learning experiment. I'll have Jackie start it off because, like many of you, she was a reluctant homeschooler. I've known Jackie since we were teeny tiny. We actually went to the same public elementary school, a grade apart. She loved public school and assumed her daughter would do the same. When her husband suggested they homeschool their daughter, Jackie was not on board.
I felt this like stress and like this, like he wants to do homeschool, but really it's usually one parent doing it. And I just know my personality. I'd want to take over if he tried it, and I knew that if it became my thing, I know myself. I do everything like, if I get passionate about something, I do it crazy. And then it, can take over my life. But I also felt this stress. I'm like, I know I used to be a teacher, but I don't want to, I just didn't want it. I didn't want the responsibility, the pressure. And I wanted her to have other experiences or whatever, of going to school and stuff. But we also really like our freedom. So that was like, oh, I really don't like to get up early. I'm used to like making my own schedule with work. So I'm used to like planning our life around us. And so we've been really used to that. And it was like, okay, that's tempting.
So Jackie initially started her daughter in public kindergarten, but she just hated it. Jackie went into the classroom for a couple of weeks to try and help her adjust, but every day was a battle. So she decided to give homeschool a try. And to her surprise,
I loved it. I loved teaching kindergarten. I loved first grade and teaching her how to read. And that was like when I taught her how to read, it was like, well, and I think she would have learned anyways. I have this idea that we think we're teaching them and they're really just learning. They learn when they want to. They learn how they want to. But whenever I feel bad about myself as a homeschooling mom or start to feel like I don't know if I can do this, I think, well, hey, she reads because of me. She's literate. That's all I care about. If I taught her how to read, she's fine, So really it was my husband's idea. And now it's I love it and we love it and it's just our lifestyle. It's not like it's perfect all the time, obviously.
Right.
I mean, I have daily struggles with her with writing, certain subjects, writing. I mean, fights, real fights. But we just the positives, they outweigh the negatives for us.
Siri agrees that the biggest advantage is flexibility and customization.
So if your child tends to be more focused in the afternoons for a particular reason, then you can, schedule your time for when they're more focused. Or if they need more sleep in the morning, you can adjust the learning schedule to fit their needs. When I was teaching, some of my students actually had health issues. And so this at-home learning allowed them so much flexibility so that they could still really learn while working through their health challenges. They could hit their doctor's appointments. Some of them were hospitalized. Some of them had different kinds of surgeries or allergies. And in a traditional classroom setting, they would have missed a lot of academic instruction. So it was really cool to have that be part of their day. I think another advantage or reason why some of the children were in my program that I worked with is because they had extracurricular activities with a higher level of success. So some of mine were singers or actors or dancers, or some were in karate and all kinds of really cool stuff. But that success also took up a lot of time. So remote learning allowed them to get their schoolwork done and learn while still excelling in some other area of their life.
My friend Sherilyn Lindsay initially started homeschooling her kids because she hated the rushed mornings getting her kids to the bus stop on time. Their mornings were frantic. There was always a diaper explosion or a missing shoe right as they were trying to get out the door. She'd find herself yelling at them all morning and then drop them off at school and say, "I love you." She wondered what message they were really getting. Then the bus wouldn't bring them home until 4:45, and it wasn't much faster if she picked them up. And by the time they did homework and ate dinner, it was time for bed. By the time her oldest 2 were about to start 2nd and 3rd grade, she needed a change. She really missed her kids, and she was tired of sending them away for the happiest part of the day. Jody started homeschooling primarily because of an experience before she even had kids, watching her sister homeschool during another national crisis.
She was homeschooling during 9/11 when that happened, and when I saw what she did, because they lived around Detroit, and so even Detroit schools locked down when 9/11 hit, and parents couldn't even pick up their kids on that day. Their kids were hiding under their desks. Parents were driving up I need to pick up my kids, and they weren't releasing kids because of this lockdown. Meanwhile, my sister's at home pointing at a world map, explaining what's happening, to me, because she was able to sit down with her kids and teach them the principles that she knew and believed and wanted them to learn, that was empowering for her. And meanwhile, these other kids are at school just freaking out, going, I don't know what's happening. I'm just scared. And maybe even their teachers didn't know what was happening. They were just following instructions. Anyways, so from that time on, I have been like daydreaming and planning about homeschooling my kids when I was ever going to have kids someday. And I just felt this huge responsibility and stewardship to educate my kids and to be able to create an environment where we had the freedom to teach them the things that we felt were important to teach. Well, we were homeschooling in Virginia for the majority of the time. We just barely moved to Michigan. But in both places, the homeschooling laws are very, very flexible. Like in Virginia, all we had to do was report to the district or the county of what subjects we planned to teach. And I think that's about it. And then by the end of the year, all my kids needed to do after they turned 6 was to test that they were progressing in math and language arts. Like this idea that kids need to be at a certain grade level became arbitrary. It was like, well, I'm going to allow them to work at their own pace. And that could mean that some things take a little bit longer, but it could also mean that they can jump ahead in certain things if they already feel like they're good about it. And so that really lifted this burden and this pressure to feel like I need to enforce this kind of pressure down on my kids, that they need to be at a certain level, that they should be reading by a certain age, that they should be blah, blah, blah. It was like, oh, those things are really based on the standard that is somewhat arbitrary. And so we relaxed. We just did a lot of reading together. We did a lot of playing together, math games together, writing games together, cooking together, doing projects, sewing together, doing gardening, did different things that we had the freedom to do. And they started learning things that I didn't even intend or plan in them to learn. That just having this freedom, lifting this burden, and just implementing things in our family culture that we value and are important has allowed space for my kids to feel like they can learn and that they want to learn.
That ability to choose what to teach your kids, untethered by traditional grade levels, is next level homeschooling for sure. Talking to Jody made me realize I need to do more research and then do a multi-episode series about this new world that's opening up to me. It's so fascinating. So I'll start working on that. Another thing Jody loves about homeschool is letting the kids' curiosity lead their learning.
Each month we have these themes where we get excited about different topics and themes of the month. Well, one of the themes recently was birds for the month. And so it was like, okay, we're going to read everything we can about birds. We watched all these programs on National Geographic and we got all these books from the library about birds. And now my kids will sit there and they look out at the bird feeder and they see all the birds come up and they can name every single bird that comes up to the bird feeder. I'm like, what? That's awesome. That's really cool. And then they we're starting to they are getting interested in doing things like stop motion. There's a program called Skillshare that you can go on and you can find different programs and classes that are available to learn. And they have like different classes on learning these things online, like coding or things like that. And my kids are interested in doing like stop motion photography. And so they have that freedom. And then they like learning different languages. They have been listening to like the Percy Jackson series. And my son goes, I want to learn Greek. I'm like, what? Okay, sure. So when they come to me, and it's my job then to say, okay, well, what do you need? And I try to supply them with these different things, like, here's a Duolingo, this program that you can learn these languages and stuff like that. And okay, you're interested then in this Greek history. Let's get some books from the library about Greek history and mythology and all this stuff. So they get really excited about it. My daughter, she wants to pick up cooking. She loves watching like the cooking shows. And so she has taken on herself. She wants to learn how to make bread all by herself. It's like, what 11-year-old knows how to make bread? Well, that's my kid's wants to figure it out. And so, yeah, it's just because they'll see something, they'll observe something. We plant seeds of opportunity and ideas. And then we sit down with them and be like, oh, is this what you're interested in? Okay, cool. Let's see what we can do to nurture that and build it.
Oh, Jody, you've almost convinced me. And finally, the biggest advantage for Jackie.
Homeschooling is a gift of time. And the time that I get to spend with her is awesome. So you never know how much time you get with your family.
This time that Jackie gets to spend with Claire has really come into focus in this past year. Last fall, Jackie got pneumonia and ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks on a ventilator. This was especially scary because Jackie has muscular dystrophy, so she's at higher risk for things like pneumonia and, of course, COVID. They're being especially careful and safe during this pandemic. Listening to Jackie and Jody and other homeschool veterans makes homeschooling sound so great. But don't beat yourself up if it's not going great for you. Even these veterans have challenges. It's hard. Don't feel bad if you plan on this being a one-and-done year of homeschooling and then you do a happy dance as you send them back to public school.
I have to say that's kind of made me so sad. Homeschooling is getting a bad rap. It seems like the majority of people have a bad opinion of it already. I mean, you get that. Like, you get the stigma. It's like, homeschoolers are weird, homeschoolers are sheltered. I get all the judgments from everybody. But it's because they don't know. They don't understand. Homeschooling is not antisocial. It's not isolation. So when everyone was thrown into this doing school at home, but you're doing it like this weird, crazy distance learning, and you're not allowed to see any friends, like that's not how homeschoolers are. Like we have homeschool co-ops. She goes to school once a week. She goes to a hybrid program. There's so many hybrid homeschoolers. So it's like she has classes, this really cool place she goes to classes. And then it's just, she's not in a class every day with kids, with 30 kids. She's in small group classes, or she's going to a play group, or you know what I mean? Like we do karate. I don't do karate, but I'm just saying we do like after school things. It's like we're not in the community. When I started homeschooling, I have a good friend, Amy Paulson, and she is in my church congregation. And she told me, and I'll never forget this, and she says, you know what? That's the one thing I can't handle is people thinking that there is one right way to do with a family, to do school. She's like, I don't care who you are. There's no one right way. And I love that she's a homeschooler saying that, because some homeschoolers are like, oh, this is the only way. And some public school people are, oh, this is the only way or the best way or whatever. And I feel like I was so glad that she said that, because I've always tried to keep that in my mind and my heart. Like my choice for my family is not the best choice for everyone. And I understand that. I don't think homeschooling is the best option for everybody, but it's the best option for us. It's the best situation for us. It's what we like. But I also do believe that almost anybody can homeschool. It's not impossible. People who work full time, both parents can homeschool. Single parents can homeschool. It's hard. It's not the same, obviously, but it's possible. But it's not the ideal situation for a lot of people.
And after this crazy pandemic, after we've all walked a mile or two uphill both ways in each other's shiny new school sneakers, let's just agree to drop judgments about the educational decisions other families make. Let's remember the great reasons to homeschool and the great reasons to send our kids to school. Then when we have all of our options back, let's celebrate the fact that we have options and support each other, however we choose to educate our kids. Thank you for listening to the How She Moms podcast. If you'd like more resources related to each episode, plus lists of my favorite things and announcements about upcoming topics and events, you can also sign up for my weekly email. You can follow me on Instagram at HowSheMoms and check out howshemoms.com, where you can read or listen to past podcast episodes arranged by topic so you can find answers to the problems you're facing right now. Thanks so much for supporting and making How She Moms possible. And special thanks to my mom, Susan Singley, who recorded my theme music. She played this song often when I was a child, and to me, it's part of the soundtrack of motherhood.